Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Alicia Naser. A quick note before we jump into today's episode. There was a name change in the podcast, and the podcast is now called the Behavior of Sport podcast. Nothing changes, same show, same value. You can still listen in all the same places as you are right now. We just switched the name, and this name change is more inclusive of all sports as opposed to just hockey. Although I will be talking about hockey, that's where I started when I started working in sport. However, I do now have clients that play on the PGA, on the ATP tour, and clients in various sports. So the behavior of sport is a name change that allows for more inclusivity of all sports as opposed to just hockey. However, at the time of this current recording, of this current episode, the name change was not made. So you're going to hear an intro right now that is the old name, Blaze and Behavior. You could just disregard that, but everything is still the same. Enjoy. Thank you for listening. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Blades and Behavior. I'm your host, Dr. Alicia Naser. In today's episode, I'm joined by my friend Guilherme von Cüpper. Guilherme is a very impressive individual. He is a FIFA agent, CEO at Berlin Sports Bridge for Talent, and also the co-director of Berlin Sports Law. He gives more of his background in his introduction and titles at the beginning of this episode, so you'll want to listen for that. He is a man of many talents, and he does a lot, and he's involved in a lot of areas of his work. And so he gives us more of a description and details in the beginning part of this episode. A couple things to note about this episode. In the beginning, the audio is clear throughout the entire episode. However, the video portion is a little fuzzy on Guilherme's end. It's just a connection issue, but it clears up throughout the episode. So if you find that to be the case, just continue listening. Either on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify. Everything that we talk about, I link to in the show notes of the episode, so you'll always want to check that. This podcast, my monthly newsletter, and my social media handles on YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn all focus on the goal of teaching you about mental and physical performance in sport. To get the most out of my content, the first and most important thing you'll want to do is subscribe to my YouTube channel. The handle is Dr. Alicia Naser. All the links to recent media features, client testimonials, the application to work with me, and other offerings can be found at the link in the show notes as well. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube. That's where you will be notified of upcoming and recent episodes. As a disclaimer, the content contained in this podcast is provided for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended to substitute for professional, medical, psychological, or behavioral health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the guidance of a qualified healthcare or behavioral professional regarding any questions or concerns you might have. This podcast and all related content produced by the Naser Institute for Behavioral Sports Psychology are independent of and not affiliated with, sponsored by, or endorsed by the Behavior Analyst Certification Board. All materials are the intellectual property of the Naser Institute for Behavioral Sports Psychology and are protected under U.S. and international copyright law. Any reproduction, distribution, or use of this material without explicit written consent is strictly prohibited. And now please enjoy this episode. I can cut it out if we need to.
No, I was about to say, finally, how was your weekend? How are you? How is everything going? Because I was stressing with my phones and my internet. But now
okay,
I wanted to be a polite person again.
No, it's all good. All right, Guilherme, thank you for being here and for spending time and joining me. I'm happy to have you. I was really looking forward to talking to you because on this podcast and what I talk about with my clients and guests and everything is mental performance and high performance. And I think a good place, though, to start is to I gave you a separate intro, but you wear so many hats and you do so many things. I don't know. I still try to figure out how does he do all of this. So I think it might be helpful if we start by having you kind of give the listener an overview of your roles. You're, yes, a FIFA agent, but you play many other roles and what that looks like for you in football and soccer.
Of course, Alicia. Thank you so much, first of all, for the introduction. And I mean, especially what I wanted to say is a special thanks to you for having me here. It's an absolute pleasure. The work you do is fantastic. Everything that right now is helping in the psychological part of players, in the increasing of their performance, I think it's it's something that is truly an asset in these days. So thank
Hmm.
you so much for that and for having me
Thank you.
here. Concerning myself, so I'm Guilherme van Cüpper. Like you mentioned, I wear many hats. In fact, I like to call myself a 360 worker in the field of football and in the industry. But basically, I am a FIFA licensed football agent. So I'm currently the CEO of Berman Sports Bridge for Talents, which is an agency of players with offices in Berlin and in Lisbon. And then besides that, I'm also co-director of Berlin Sports Law, which is a sports law firm that also is part of the Berlin Sports Group. We are lucky to have accompanied basically clubs and players from all over the world, and we represent several clubs from some of the bigger leagues in the world, not only in Europe but also abroad in the US, in Saudi, etc., and players. So in everything concerning FIFA disputes, CAS disputes, um, situations concerning player contracts. So we do a little bit of all of this. And then
Hmm.
besides this and the agency, we still do consultancy for companies in general, whether for investment companies that want to work in football and enter the football industry by buying football clubs, or funds that want to enter in specific brands connected to sports. So it's kind of, like you say, wearing many hats. But I
Hmm.
think in the world we are right now, if we can work 360 and basically help in all the needs of our clients, it's better. But I must
Hmm.
say that one of the things that I treasure the most is the relationship with my players, the possibility that I have to be able to do something for their lives and to be able to have a little impact in their performance, in the way they structure themselves. For me, it's one
Hmm.
of the most important and interesting things, I would say.
Yeah, it's so much. I think it's really great to hear that that's something that's so important to you because um caring about the people that you work with, so it's not just transactional, but there's a relationship there, I think is really great because that's very hard to come by. So let me ask you, because obviously this is more your space than it is mine, football and international sports. I obviously want to slowly branch out that way, but you're more familiarized with what that looks like. And I remember last time we met, I had asked you, is it a thing? Like, is mental performance a thing in football? And you had educated me that it is. And I was not that I didn't think it was. There's something about sport in the States and mental health in the States and just the way that we go about things here in the US that does look different, right? The systems, the culture, the language, things are different. And maybe how we prioritize things are different. And so, what is the role of mental performance in Europe as you see it from your point of view and in football in general?
Mhm.
And has it always been around? So I'm wondering, is it not just a difference in cultures and countries, if it's been something that's relevant in general, and also if it's always been a thing, and has it always been a variable in sports as you see it? Or has it just been something that's become more relevant as social media has kind of grown, and how media and reporters have more access to players? Like, I'm just wondering from your perspective what that looks like and how long has it been around and been relevant? Or maybe it has been for a while, it's just not been talked about.
It's an excellent question, Alicia, and I would say that yes, it has not been around. Maybe the psychological issues, yes, they have been
Mhm.
around for players for a long time, but I think they probably prefer not to discuss it. I think this is not only in football and in sports, but in many areas. I think people tend to believe that speaking about this kind of issues is a weakness.
Mhm.
And when you speak about an area that has so much competition and an area where you are supposed to be perfect and to be at the peak of your performance week in and week out.
Mhm.
I would say that in general, the players would say, okay, if probably I go to my coach, or if I go to someone and I speak about my issues, I speak about that maybe I'm not feeling myself these days, or I'm having some family issue that is affecting me, or I'm just feeling that I'm not good enough for a particular reason, or there was an episode that just happened that probably brought down my energy, my belief of myself, then maybe they'll look at me and say, okay, this guy doesn't have the enough the mental strength, or maybe this guy is just coming and he's so lucky to be here, to be able to perform, to do what he loves. How come now he's having this kind of issues? And the truth is, independently on the a top us being playing in a top club or being supposedly at the peak of our lives, that doesn't necessarily mean we don't have psychological issues and we are not struggling with our mental health. Um, I saw a documentary not long ago. I think it was called Stats or something like this. With it was basically Noah Hill and his psychiatrist, and Noah Hill was mentioning that when he reached, and this is not sports, this is cinema, but he was saying that when he reached what he thought it was the peak of his career, he felt as basically at his worst, because he always had issues, and he always thought that once he reached this point that okay, now I'm a star, now I am the best, now I accomplished all my goals, I have money, I have success, now I'll be good. And then he said, okay, no, I still go into the mirror and I see the same old fat kid with no confidence that I used to see, and I try to overcome, and by not talking about it was not reaching this point that I was able to overcome it. And I think it's a bit as a football player. If you are feeling an issue, if you had some trauma from your childhood, if you're not believing in yourself, it's not because you achieve a certain status that you're necessarily better. There was an episode also that I loved of Diary of a CEO of Stephen Bartlett with Thierry Henry. And Thierry was exactly saying that. And he was saying that when he was at the peak of his career, he was highly depressed, started to have some really intrusive bad thoughts, and he was trying to wonder, but why? I have everything I achieved, all a player can achieve. Why am I feeling like this? And gladly, I think we are reaching the stage, and I'm fortunate to work with a lot of players, not only on the agency side, but also as general clients. I work with a lot of legends of the game, so I work with players that reach the peak of their careers in football, and they still say it was kind of taboo to go to your coach, or to go to your club, or to go even to your entourage or agent and say, I'm struggling mentally because I don't want to be seen as weak, and I need to be the better version of myself. And I think these days, because in all other areas people are finally talking about this, they are reaching a point that they say, okay, it's okay not to be okay. It's okay to face certain issues, and it's okay to discuss them. And Alicia, let me just add, I wrote an article not long ago called The Agent of the Future, where I highlight that the players more and more these days, they don't look into their agents just because they look to the perfect intermediary that is able to facilitate the best deals. They also look into agents that care about them, care about their families, that are there in the day to day, that they can talk when they are struggling, that they have an entourage of people that they know that they can help in case they are in need. And this is, I think, gradually becoming a thing. And I think that the agents and the professionals in general that don't have a particular appetite for these questions, and they don't actually think that their clients, before being their clients, they are human beings, in the future they will be not as successful as they were now, because people start to prioritize other things. So mental health has been now as important as ever, I would say.
Yeah, it's so wonderful to hear that you understand the importance of the player as a whole, and not just their talent, and not it just being transactional. But as you're saying, players are looking for agents who are not just concerned with how much money can you make me or what percentage do you get. It's more so like, how are you looking at me as a player as a whole? And that includes my family and my overall well-being and my mental health. It's by the way, the paper that you wrote about the agent of the future, maybe if you can send that and I can link it, if that way we can share it with anyone who watches and listens, that'd be great. I think, a lot of agents could learn a lot from that, so that'd be wonderful.
I will,
But
of course.
great. One reason why I'm really interested in this is because, throughout the course of studying for my PhD, a big emphasis was on meaning and the meaning that we give to words, right? Because we think our thoughts are made up of words. And so that changes how we behave and how we feel, the meaning we give to things. For example, if I say the word shark, immediately it triggers maybe some feeling like visceral feelings, physical feelings of fear, or like a bad feeling in my stomach because it's associated with danger, right? And so the same thing happens when we talk about anxiety or depression. Those words and the words we associate with them can also spark this visceral physical feeling in our body and these other feelings that are related to what we call mental health and then also linked to performance for athletes. And so why I'm so interested in this is because football is such an international sport, right? It happens all over the world. And that's not to say, other sports don't. Like, for example, I have many hockey players and there's French, the Swedes, there's, here in the States. But I would suspect that football is the most international and therefore the most languages spoken. And so I've always wondered if there were, because you know how sometimes in certain languages there aren't words that translate. Like I speak Arabic, for example. Sometimes in Arabic there are not words that translate to English, so I can't really match. It's not a one for one match. And I've always wondered if that component of the cultural and language differences across football had any impact on the level of mental performance or mental health barriers and struggles that athletes faced. Because language is different, therefore, the meaning we give to the words is different, therefore, our experiences are different, you see? And so I'm just very interested in if there's any correlation there. But it sounds like from what you're telling me, the change in differences in language doesn't matter, that it is still very much relevant and something that athletes themselves and agents consider. So from a FIFA agent and development perspective standpoint, how important would you say the psychological side of performance is when clubs are evaluating players' long-term performance? Is that something that's being talked about in scouting and in evaluation?
Yeah, I would say more and more. I think in the beginning, most like with the typical data that someone would look into, it would be more data related to, okay, let's say about accurate passes, accurate long balls, speed, and more than ever, I think that the parts of the game that are not so easily seen starts to have a lot of impact. I do remember I have since we are talking about also the US, I can give you an example. We have recently transferred a player to the MLS, to Charlotte. He actually just had his debut
Oh,
in
I
the
just
starting
saw you
11.
posted it. Yeah.
Exactly, last week, and this week he was playing, also starting against Inter Miami. And one of the things that called more the attention to him when we transferred him from Ghana to Croatia initially, was the leadership. They were all saying, "Oh my God, this is a player with such a personality. He is a commander. He's just 19, 20 years old, and he's commanding players that are 30, 31, 32, and he's the one telling them where to move, where to position themselves, pushing for them." And I think this kind of skills that are not so easily seen in when you're checking an accuracy of a specific physical skill are more and more important. And not only
Yeah.
this, but also the personality into the locker room. Is he a player that can help his other teammates to achieve excellence? Is he someone that pushes for the team? Is he someone toxic that when the team loses is the first one putting his dad down or pointing fingers? This more and more is important, and I think club especially structures that are starting to analyze so many other aspects, and they know that this is important for the ultimate goal of a team. They start to look more and more and more into it, I would say. And one thing you highlighted also, issue that I think it's super important, is like you said, the barriers of languages. I would say that in football, we always say football is a universal language, but the truth is that it also exists, and the adaptation is different between players. First of all, the adaptation not only in terms of language, but also culturally. You know, you have a player, for example, that have a different religion. You have a player that go through Ramadan, a player that's used to pray at certain hours, and then he comes into a totally different place where he needs to find his mosque, where he feels welcomed. He needs to find his tribe of people. Let's call it like this. He needs to adapt himself to eating new types of food. So all of this, of course, and then you can be lucky enough to go into a place where a club understands this, or a place where the club doesn't understand, or a place where you have other teammates that pass through the same, or a place where you don't. So this is just one example of many examples that can happen. So having this in mind, you can see how difficult it can be. Then add to this, being, for example, being super young, living abroad for the first time. And if you even add to this also the language barrier, and finally, for example, I'm gonna give you an example. I have a friend, Sarah Duke. She's a language teacher, for example. A few years ago, no one would talk about that. And right now, for example, she prepared Alexander Arnold for his move when he moved to Real Madrid from England. She teach Spanish for a couple of months, and everyone was super surprised and praising because he did a whole conference when he was presented in Spanish. So these things are so important, and more you understand, for example, even how language is important. And not only this, like I was saying, even brands and technologies thinking about this. We have, for example, we recently had a meeting with a sports tech company that what they do is having technology gadgets so that in training, when the coach is speaking, it can be immediately translated to you in their own language. So you can see the way even sports tech and AI is developing, that this kind of different things are already having an impact, and you try to make the most you can to make sure that you optimize the performance of the club and all of the players in different sectors. So this is even a small example of how everything now is more impactful. The traditional way you did scouting, the traditional way you use technology was in fact different, but there's still a long way to go. There's still a long way to go on all fronts, but especially in the way you can apply psychology and psychology context into the players. I definitely believe that all players should be accompanied by a psychologist. Some clubs, they already have it, some clubs they not, but you also need to see case by case, because there are some players that maybe they have a psychologist in their club, a sports psychologist, but not all of them want to speak with a sports psychologist that belongs to the organization they work for. So sometimes they want to have their own person. So it's important for them to be in a safe space and actually select the ones that they believe, okay, this is the person that I feel safe, this is the person I want to talk to. And also understanding that maybe some clubs, they have these departments, but sometimes they just have, because outside, as a general perspective, people think that you should have, so you do it, but then in fact it's not really useful, or is not really functioning the right way. That's why I think there's still a long way to go.
Yeah. It's so interesting. I never thought about the translation having something in their ear so they can translate it to their native language. You think we would have thought about that before?
It's crazy, right? I mean, times are changing.
Yeah, I feel like that's such a simple, like, aha, why didn't we think of that before? But it is quite wild the amount of data and analytics you can collect now with AI and with these gadgets and wearables. But what's interesting, Guilherme, is that you can't collect necessarily obvious data on the psychological, emotional in the moment, that part of the game, right? And that's one of the most important that affects the execution is being able to understand emotionally and psychologically what's going on. But there are no stats for that. I just
Yeah.
was speaking with a former GM of an NHL team here in the States, and he was saying, because he was highly involved in scouting. And so he was saying, like, the intangibles, those things that we have all the stats and analytics for everything else, but the emotional, psychological, there is no way to necessarily measure that. Like, yes, sure, you can measure in some ways in the psychology literature. There are ways to measure personality traits and things like that, but it's not as immediate and as obvious as measuring execution of a shot or a save or things like that. So it's quite interesting. So, how has the modern football landscape changed what it means to be a high performing athlete in your eyes as an agent and also in the eyes of clubs? Because we have we have mental health and then we have mental performance.
Uh-huh.
And mental health is the psychological emotional side of things, and then mental performance is separate, but the two are often interconnected, because you can't have really great mental performance without good healthy mental health. So how has the landscape changed, what it means to be a high performing footballer?
Again, really good question. Which I would say that, and actually, in the US, I mean, I'm not a sports psychologist. You'd say what you would know way better than me, but I have the impression from what I see that especially concepts of mental performance have been way more developed in the US, because I think that when you look into NBA, into NHL, into NFL, I think all of these organizations, they were always so based since the beginning on stats, on performance, on. I mean, you don't watch a stream of NBA without looking into the most detailed performances he did. X free throws and the percentages this and that, and it's really interesting, that part. So I think the mental performance on how the players can be better, how they can overcome themselves, that kind of US mentality of always pushing yourself to the highest levels that you Americans also have, not only in sports. I think it's a great
Nah, I don't
concept
know
to
about that.
transport. I think so. I think so. And so I would definitely separate mental performance and mental health, because I think if you speak about mental performance, then yes, I think the concepts are kind of developing already for a few years. So
Mm-hmm.
when you look into what's a professional athlete, what's a top athlete, you already had always these measures and criterias of what you should achieve, how much you should run, speed tests, this and that. So, and this you can also apply to the mental part of it, of how you can overcome yourself. The
Mm-hmm.
mental health, I think there was where was basically the biggest issue, because one thing is you talking about why are you not performing or what you can do to perform better, speaking about only performance concepts. But if you think about other kinds of traumas and really psychological issues that you can have, that sometimes are even outside of your skill sets, or that maybe it's based about not necessarily sports but different things.
Mm-hmm.
And let's say, for example, I love always to bring examples to the table. I was just thinking, for example, about one. There was also a crazy interview that I remember that this player, Adebayor, that played in the Premier League, did a few years ago. And Adebayor was saying that he thought about suicide several times, even when he was at the peak of his career in the Premier League, because of the pressure that the family was putting on him, because every day new cousins were coming in saying that we need money, you
Mm-hmm.
achieved and now we don't care about your family. So the pressure was constant and constant, and people they used to not have anyone to talk about. And then maybe you then go to the match, your mind is totally in a different place. And then you think, okay, how we can do better when we think about mental performance. How can we help this player achieving better results? But then the problem there was not maybe in the mental performance, was in the mental health. So I think that the perfect sports psychologist is someone that can help on two fronts. So it's someone that can actually, okay, let's optimize your performance based on your skills, based on things that you can improve, based on your mentality. But then let's also understand which kind of traumas, which kind of issues, which kind of situations might be even more internally into your core, that maybe if we deconstruct, if we speak about those, maybe we can do it in a different way. And then you sports psychologists will know much better than me how you can deconstruct that. And if you want to use more a Freudian idea of going into the trauma and understanding what happened, or an Adlerian idea of going there and making sure that you think, okay, every day you can change yourself and be a new person, go for it, and the past doesn't exist, and you always should focus on the future and what you can do next. I mean, then depending
like what you think a session looks like.
exactly, like player by player, I think you will know then how to shape themselves, and this is your job.
Okay.
And what you do best.
I'm glad
But
you don't do it, because I'll just say I don't tell them the past doesn't exist.
no, I'm joking, of course, Alicia.
I know.
What I'm just, but actually, it's. I mean, I don't know anything about psychology, but I love it, and I know that that there's a book that I recommend always a lot of friends to read, that is based a bit on Adler philosophy, and basically they are always saying that sometimes people focus too much on trauma, and they actually don't look also into this situation that sometimes some people pass by the same issues, but they react to them in different ways, and sometimes they use their traumas as excuses to also don't overcome certain aspects of their lives. I think it's even called the courage to be disliked. And sometimes they care too much about what other people say. They care too much about other people's opinions, and sometimes you just need to disregard other people's tasks, the pressure of the media. I know it's easier said than done, but having a professional, for example, like you, people that really understand these concepts in a way that they can make them think about them in different ways, maybe it will help them so much to overcome some issues.
It's a great point. It's a really great point. I think not even just in sport, but like you were saying, all humans would really benefit from that. But it's a fine line, because we should care what others think of us, because we're social creatures and we need others. That's how we came about in this world, is through connection and through social interaction. However, there's a fine line, right? And when it overpowers how you feel about yourself, and when it becomes all consuming, where you're just so worried about what others think of you, it becomes debilitating. How can you live in a calm state or live freely and be authentic and just be yourself, because you're always so worried about what others think of you? And the irony of that is, there's this saying, like, no one's really paying attention to you because they're too busy paying attention to how people view them. And it is true. I think we often walk around like wondering how other people are viewing us, but they're too busy worrying about how other people are viewing them to even care what's going on with us. But we naturally, as humans, have this egotistical mindset where we sort of always think everything is about us. And this is why I love to travel. Because when I travel, I'm reminded of how small I am and how small my problems are. And when I think something happens in my life, I'm like, it's just a little blimp in time, But
Super well said.
yeah, but it's again, to your point, it's not easy. It's easier said than done. So on this topic, and I just have, two more questions for you, but on this topic of not caring so much about what others think of us, or trying to allow for things to be just as they are. Like, we don't have to please everybody, right? But we do need to make sure that we are living true to our values, being respectful, but then also not taking on baggage that we can't change or control. So, what are some of the biggest mental and performance challenges that you think young footballers are facing when they're trying to bridge the gap from local talent to international? Because I think this kind of corresponds with that of coming up as, if when you're trying to go from a local talent to, on an international stage of playing, there can be a lot of barriers that you face. Of course, wanting to please everybody and caring what others think of you and caring what the media is saying might be some, but what are some other challenges that you find are the most common?
We shall say, first of all, I think social media can have a really positive impact in many areas. I mean, you can use social media to to promote your word, to promote your thoughts, to promote your beliefs in a really good way, and to have an impact on other people. But you can also use social media to bring someone down, to be a hater, to make hate comments. And I think that the problem, especially at a young age, I mean, imagine you are starting your career, you come with a dream, you reach a big stage, and then every time you make a mistake, or every time you make something that is not probably something that you would be proud of, and things happen because people make mistakes, but then a normal one makes a mistake, and the next day maybe they apologize to the one or two persons they need to apologize, and life goes on. But then maybe if you imagine an 18, 19-year-old kid that maybe he has one or two behaviors that should be changed, and not only behaviors, because you can have a bad behavior and this is to blame on you. But then it's difficult then when you're trying to get better, you have basically thousands of people hating on you online, and sending you life threats and threatening your family, and basically coping with all of this and to these comments is not easy. Or sometimes just because you are a nice person and you made a mistake, and maybe even just a sports mistake, like everyone makes mistakes at their job. He goes there, he misses a penalty, and the next day they need to take out their social media accounts, or they need to don't go to the press because everyone is blaming on you, and basically putting all their frustrations of maybe other aspects of their lives on you and on someone that makes a mistake doing what they love the most. This is really not easy. And being able to have the inner strength to overcome these issues and to continue to be focused on the goal, continue to be focused on on what they want to accomplish. Sometimes it's not easy, and it's so easy for you to basically stay in a negative cycle and in a negative role, and it's so difficult to go out of it. This is, I
Yeah.
think, one of the issues. Then the second issue is also that sometimes you don't have the right surroundings, you don't have the right entourage. And this is when I mentioned the agent of the future, I also mentioned this. It's also the role of the agent to make sure that the family has the impact that they should have, but not much more than they should have. It's the role of the agent knowing that the entourage of the player is fulfilled with the right people, in terms of nutrition, in terms of mental health, in terms of financial. Because imagine, for example, let's say financial literacy. You have a player that starts to get really horrible financial advice and starts to destroy the amounts of money that he's building in the beginning of their careers. This also affects on the pitch, because you're someone with nothing, then you're someone with a lot, and someone comes and try to basically step in and take advantage of yourself. And this then also reflects on the way you are playing, what you're bringing from the issues you have in your external life. And also because you need to understand that I think the top athletes are the ones that know that have this growth, this sense of, I want to eat the world. I still don't want win anything. I want to win more and more and more. Like this kind of Novak Djokovic mentality in tennis. You know, the guy is 40 years old, or LeBron James in the NBA. I mean, he could just happily retire with what they accomplished, and they still want more and more and more. And I think some kids sometimes they sign their first contract and they think, okay, I already made it, and they already act like they own the world, and they don't. One of the things that's for me it's so crazy is that when you look into guys that are 40 years old, like Ronaldo, for example, is still performing, still hungry, And then you look into kids that are 18 or 19 years old, and they're already acting like they won everything, with their golden necklaces and their hip hop video clips, nothing against it. But what I mean is sometimes people need to understand that they need to do it step by step. They will have times, of course, they will make their own mistakes, and it's normal. Everyone is a kid. Everyone is sometimes unused not to have something, and then you have it, and you want, and maybe you are a bit exaggerating on what you should do, but trying to have the right people surrounding you, putting your feet into the ground, and making you still stay connected a little bit to the reality, which when you work with top stars, it's not easy, because grounding someone that earns so much money, grounding someone that basically accomplished with what most of us can only dream, and sometimes with really young ages, I think it's a big challenge that is also so much connected to mental health. Because then one of the things I say when I lecture to young kids, for example, and they are football players, and I do this also if I giving classes to aspirant to sports lawyers or sports agents, I always say, have no regrets. Because, I mean, not every one of you will be the best sports lawyer, the best football agent, or the best football player. But if you know you gave 100%, you stayed grounded, you did what you could, and you not accomplished it, it happens. But the worst thing is you knowing that you had everything to succeed, the talent, the means, the platform, and then because you didn't have the right mindset, you did not succeed. And this is where you're going to struggle. This is where you always stay with this thing in your head that I could have done it, and I didn't, because I didn't have the right guidance, or I acted like I should not have acted.
Yeah.
And this is the worst that can happen.
What you're saying reminds me of two things. First, the differences in generations. I think when you speak about the Novak Djokovic and LeBron James, and even like Rafael Nadal, they grew up in an era where social media wasn't as prominent. And I also think that work ethic and grinding for what they have had a different meaning than it does now. And I think, to your point of seeing younger players at a very young age now boast as though they've already made it to the top, and you're like, hey, it's only the first year of your career, you just signed a contract, don't blow all that money. I think that has a lot to do with how the definitions of work ethic and grit and hard work have changed, and also competitiveness for the love of the game, not for a show, not to be showy. I think there has been some changes generationally in that. And I think it also, to your point, exactly what you said, has so much to do with social media and showing off certain things and portraying a certain lifestyle or certain look. And that wasn't around before for it to be relevant. You just played for the love of the game and for competition, not necessarily to make the most and to show off. Of course, money was always a factor, but it was just different then. And then the second piece, I forgot. So I won't say it, because now I forgot what the second thing I was going to say was. So it must not have been that important. Yeah, these are all wonderful points. Well, Guilherme, listen, all of your clients are so lucky to have you, and so lucky to have somebody like you who cares.
Thank you so much.
No, absolutely. Because even I already had known that from the first time we met and spoke and we connected, but even just hearing how well-rounded your approach is now, it's very admirable. And I have great respect for you for that. And all of your clients are very lucky, and future clients are very lucky to be, under your care and your watch, because you do care about them, and it's very obvious. And I think that can be very hard to find sometimes in the agency world. And everyone just has so much to learn from you. So This was so wonderful. Thank you for joining me. Really quickly, is there anywhere you would like us to direct the audience to? You do so much, like I said, Berlin Sports, the law group, then you also teach. I also have a lot of students and those looking for internships and things like that that listen, coaches and agents that listen. Where should we link in the show notes?
Super. So, Alicia, basically, I mean, in my Instagram, in my
Okay.
LinkedIn, I always post and I have the connections to all the several aspects of our company, whether the law part, the agency part. So, my Instagram is GV Cüpper, so GVCUPPER, and LinkedIn,
Mhm.
Guilherme von Cooper, you will find me. And then I have also all the links to Berlin Sports or Bridge for Talents when I try to share a lot. We are also super into education. I mean, I'm a guest teacher myself in several
Mhm.
universities. The thing I love to do the most in the world.
Mhm.
And besides that, even in Berlin Sports, I mean, usually I do it for other universities, but even in Berlin Sports, we just recently launched a summer school exactly to help the young generation between the age of 18, 21, 22, 23 that are still struggling on where to find the right entry into the football market or even which area they want to go. We are having this program in Lisbon 1 week in the summer where we have like a day in the life of a football agent, a day in the life of
Oh, that's
a
awesome.
sports lawyer, day in the life of a sports media. So you try to have top people from the industry of several different areas in football so they can know
Yeah.
where to direct themselves. But Alicia, let me also give you another word, which is I talked a lot about my experience with with men football players,
Mhm.
but women football is growing a lot, and if you
Mhm.
think that these issues still happen a lot with men that are been basically at the pinnacle of the business for so many years, now
Mhm.
that women's football is growing and growing and growing, let's try to make things differently, you know. And this is something that I want to advocate a lot for the next years. One of my main goals would be to also help women football players with this, because although what we represent mostly is men, we think
Mhm.
there is still a big niche with the women football players that have a lot of new issues coming. And then I had the opportunity to also work recently and lecture in an association in the US called TPN, the Players Network.
Mhm.
And within TPN, I spoke with a lot of players that told me about so many psychological pressure coming from clubs to play in certain conditions. And you know that there are a lot
Mhm.
of circumstances around women that are different than men and that should
Mhm.
be respected. And since still even the operational part of women's side of football in some of the clubs is not as professional as men, sometimes the way they deal with them when it comes to contracts and respecting contracts, the way of providing a professional background is still not there. So let's try to, while women's football is growing, to make sure that the surrounding of women's football coming into mental health,
Mhm.
performance, and everything we spoke about can be already coming in a good way from the start. So we don't spend, again, like we did with men, 30 and 40 years without talking about these issues and doing it from the start. I think that's also really powerful message I would like to pass. And look at the work you've been doing also in the US. I have a good friend, Anna Pereira. She's basically the CEO of this company called the Wellness Universe. One of the things, for example, they were doing is not only helping women football players, but also even in the men's side, they're trying to basically implement wellness in the MLS clubs. And this is
Mhm.
again a concept that is so interesting. So I hope women like her and like you, Alicia, which is doing this amazing work of talking about mental health in sports, helping the players understanding that they need help sometimes, and it's okay to need help, and going to a professional like you to try to
Mhm.
change their mindsets, shape their mindsets, do something different. So thanks to you also for discussing these topics, for being there for the players, for embracing such an important area like it is mental health and mental performance and psychological part of sports.
Yeah, it's a wonderful point you make, is women in sports. Women in sports is growing. It has been growing, and they deserve just as much attention. And I'm really glad that you brought that up. We will link to your Instagram, your LinkedIn, and to Berlin Sports Law and the group and everything that you mentioned in the show notes. And on that note, don't hang up because I'm going to stop recording, but we'll chat after. Thank you, Guilherme. I appreciate it.
Of
Anything else you
course.
want to say, you want to leave off with? That was wonderful.
Thank you so much. Which is perfect. And just thanking you again. It was
Thank
a
you.
pleasure.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube so you don't miss it. And we will see you next week for another episode.